relationship with this mellow? Because Bhaktivinoda Thakur is my Param Gurudev, and I have supreme faith in him. And just a while ago, Prem Prayojan Prabhu was speaking about Bhaktivinoda Thakur, how he says that we should not worship in Nadi Nagari Bhav or see Gaurangas and Nagar. I accept this also.
Basically, there's another interesting point that he mentioned in that sentence. There's another interesting point that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentioned in that sentence. He said, don't neglect Braja Bhajan to do a separate bhajan towards Mahaprabhu's Navadip Leela. That's also another interesting point.
Okay. Now, you see, how did this come into my life? Maybe it's important to explain. I think I have all the blame goes to Gorgadada. I have to, when I fell in love with Gorgadada, I was in ISKCON back in 1975, and there was a devotee who was a sannyasi. His name was Subal Swami. In the very beginning, he was here in Mayapur. And he was one of the first ISKCON devotees to ever be in Mayapur. And he was associating with a lot of Bhaktisiddhanta's disciples. He also met with Lalita Prasad Thakur at that time. And I was in Hawaii at the time, and he was talking about Gorgadada. He's saying there Radha and Krishna. And I just thought, as soon as I heard that, it struck a chord in me from my previous life, I think. I think in my previous life I was a bhakta, I was worshipping Gorgadada. And I became Joga Brasta. In other words, I was here in Bengal and I was worshipping Gorgadada, and I fell down and I took birth in the Western countries. But very shortly, I started, I didn't find any shelter there, and I started looking for my shelter. And I traveled all over the world in more than 35 countries. And I finally arrived in India in 1969. And I started looking all around and all around. And the first time nothing happened to me. I was looking for sadhus. And actually, the first time I met some Shiv sadhus, and I went to Banaras, I went to Rishikesh, and I had some sanskar of Vedic culture at that time. But when I went back to America in 1970, I met Prabhupada. And at first I thought I'd never shave up my head and I could never join these guys. They look very strange, and besides I didn't want to give up my sensual enjoyment because I was living in Hawaii, on the island of Maui, in a beautiful cave overlooking Honolulu Bay. It's one of the best surfing breaks in the whole world. Yeah. And I was in the prime of my teenage years. I had a beautiful girlfriend. I didn't have to work. I got everything I needed was there. Just down the road there was mangoes, there was pineapples, the farmers were growing all sorts of vegetables. I had food stamps from the government. I was getting free food, everything. I had my surfboard, I had everything. I was living in a life of the highest material pleasure that one could experience in this world. It was very heavenly there. But one day, I went into the town of Lahaina, and I used to distribute the papayas that I used to take from the trees, the ripe ones, to the people. And I gave one to Siddha Swarup. And he looked at me, and he said, "Do you want to come to our feast?" And they were having a feast, and they were chanting Hare Krishna. I went there for the first time.
Free food.
Yeah. And so I went and I joined them, and then But after a short time, I joined, you see, when Prabhupada came. Prabhupada came, and so from there, Prabhupada came to the main island, Honolulu, and there was a devotee named Gorshundar who was in charge. His wife, his name was Govinda Dasi, and the temple, the ISKCON temple, was in McKinley Street. And when I met Prabhupada for the first time, I still thought that I wasn't able to join this group, you know, but I was attracted to Prabhupada. And when Prabhupada left Hawaii, I went back to my cave on Maui. I discovered my surfboard wasn't there. It was stolen. My girlfriend had fled. And the money I had hidden under the rock was also stolen. So I decided to join the temple. So I joined the temple, and within a month's time, I couldn't hack it anymore. They were telling me what to do. Don't do this, you know, and then they're pushing me all around. And I decided, now I'll go to India. In 1972, I came to India. This is the second time in India. And the very first place I went was Vrindavan. And I arrived in Vrindavan in the very beginning of Kartik, on the very same day that Srila Prabhupada was arriving. He was staying in the Radha Damodar temple. And I went there, the very first day I joined there, I shaved up my head. I gave all my money, I surrendered all my money. And I saw Prabhupada, and Obil Kapoor was, he gave a speech to welcome Prabhupada, and he was very praising of his work and preaching. I remember that. And the whole month, I had a very wonderful time in Prabhupada's association. Every day, we were hearing Prabhupada speaking from Nectar Devotion in the Srimad Bhagavatam twice a day. And practically every day Prabhupada was having he was invited to lunch, sometimes at this Gaudiya Math, sometimes at some Radharaman's temple, sometimes at some Rajavasi's home. Every morning he was going on walk. And at evening he was giving programs at different temples. And everywhere we had Prabhupada's association. There was no closed doors. We could just walk right into Prabhupada's room and talk with him. And it was so intimate. And it was it formed such a strong samskar, the way I saw Prabhupada in those days, and how he was so natural. And there wasn't any Aishwarya. There was very few devotees there, and there was a few, very shortage of money also. We lived very austerely. And I took initiation from Prabhupada that month. And first initiation. Harinam initiation. Anyway, very shortly after that.
What name did you
Don't mention it. He doesn't like it.
Yeah, I don't like the name.
Don't say Pandu.
This is history.
I'm sorry. If you don't want to hear this, I won't talk about it anymore. It's interesting because it's leading. I'm sorry. It's leading up to.
Prabhupada give you?
I don't want to say because you know it wasn't given by Prabhupada. It was selected by Guru Das. You see, Prabhupada didn't always select the names. Guru Das was in charge there. Guru Das and Jamuna were there. There was Shyam Sundar and Malati. There was Hari Griva. There was Yashodanandan and Guru Kripa. And when I took initiation, what's his name? Lokanath Swami was sitting right next to me. He got initiated just right after I did. And anyway.
Was Pandu there?
No.
Kirtananda?
Anyway, after that, after the whole month of Kartik, then Prabhupada went to Hyderabad, and we were preaching the whole month there. And then we went back to Bombay, and then I got very sick, and I had to go back to Hawaii again to try to recover. But anyway, when I came back in 1974, I came here to Mayapur. Prabhupada invited all the devotees to come to Mayapur for the very first Navadip Dham Parikrama. And this Navadip Dham Parikrama was led by Achyutananda. He was a very expert singer. He had been here, he learned a little bit of Bengali. And as soon as I arrived here, I was thinking that I've been here before.